Hello, guys. Welcome to my very first lesson about my claim the best way to grow is by being in the wrong. Um, I did find a tripod from the back of my car that's probably haven't been used in the last 6 months, so I just thought I could try something new, and I really do like it. How it's angled. It's only capturing the best view inside my room, so that's really nice. And then I have a script here on my main monitor along with the OBS window, so I can kind of just like do this if I need to. And then I got my presentation on this side. So if so the majority of the video I'll just be facing this, reading the script, which took me around an additional day or two to get everything. But I'm excited. I'm excited to go over, and there's gonna be some few cuts. But anyway, I'm gonna start my intro now. But yes, hello guys. My name is Oliver, and I just started a mentorship channel to guide the current and younger generation to become the best version of themselves. Since the world's only getting more complex from here, and I'd argue that preparing and guiding others is one of the most crucial things we could do today. So, without further to do, let's get down to business. So, I guess before we go in, I see this on the script. One of the best things I've learned, or lessons I should say, is from a mistake or being in the wrong. I had to learn how to take accountability for it, and I, in a way, still am taking accountability for it. But the best part about taking accountability is that I'm able to continue to walk on earth with a greater mindset coming out, and I hope that I can help anybody who clicked on this video. So please relax, get comfortable. I know I am with this right here. And pause when you have to. And without adding further, like I said earlier, let's get down to business. So let's start simple, right? What is being in the wrong? Being in the wrong is just being responsible for a mistake. Sorry. Getting this script is pretty hard. It's just being responsible for a mistake. But another question may arise, like, how can we grow from this? Is there any prerequisites for this? And I say yes. Yes, there is. But some of the basic prereqs are accountability, honesty, positive reinforcement, and etc. There's plenty of other examples which we will cover later. So yes, I think a quote I'm sure everybody has heard is from Roy L. Smith. I don't really know who's responsible for this quote, but just a quick Google search told me attributed to this guy. So the quote is, "The ability to accept responsibility is the measure of the man." So in my own words, I like to say the difference between a man and a boy is their ability to take accountability. And just going over the basic definitions of taking accountability is just being responsible for an action. And a line below, man, I gotta pay attention to this. Acknowledging mistakes aids in our development, but there's a way to do it. So saying lines like "you're held accountable for your actions" it's generally unpleasant to hear and kind of make you feel, kind of make us feel dismissive towards one's concerns or claims, and that consequently leads us to a closed mindset that doesn't kickstart growth. So, going to the next slide on why I think many people may not view being in the wrong as an opportunity to grow is that I think many of us growing up had related fears of failure or mistake. And, which is a negative reinforcement that comes with the word failure. And it gives us dysphoria, which just means unpleasant. But it's typically used in a neuroscience context. So a key neuroscience lesson is that we behave less when punished, and we behave more when rewarded. And I just put like a little research. You can just read the abstract to get the gist of it. But expanding upon the science, the biggest driver of learning is neuroplasticity, and it is our brain's ability to make new or strengthen neural pathways. So some connections may strengthen, like learning, and some may weaken, like forgetting. The brain is constantly wiring and loosening. That's where the plasticity comes from. It's like, molding your brain to however shape. But if you kind of don't keep disciplining, or I don't know what I'm trying to go with, but if you're trying to make a triangle without the reinforcements, it's going to turn into a blob, right? So that's plasticity. So, and it's not easy because there are steps to achieving this. Your brain has a learning cycle. Step 1 is experience. You try something new with an expected outcome. The networks in your neurons are unique in the sense that trial and error isn't really a low effort routine. Your brain's ability to shape becomes easier. The more you try, the stronger the connection becomes. Just like growing a muscle, it takes effort. Without it, there's no need for the brain to develop more. So step 2 would be error signal. So you tried something new, hoping your brain would predict the outcome of the experimental behavior, but it didn't go as planned. So in a way, the brain throws a short temper tantrum because it's trying something new with an expectation but doesn't meet the actual, result. So this step comes with emotional discomfort because you did something unique and complex only to end up feeling like nothing. And in a way, this is a make or break in learning because you can either push the discomfort and constantly update your brain with new knowledge, or you can just forget it, quit. But if you do continue, it's going to place you to the third step, which is reflection. You take a breather, start analyzing what went wrong, question anything to bring closure, and assess what the brain could do differently to yield a favorable result. So you're just optimizing neural connections from the past as reference, and kind of step 2, building and refreshing your model, and which brings to step 4, reinforcement. The brain strengthens the new corrected pathway after matching the favorable outcome, which releases a bunch of dopamine, and that just incentivizes the brain to repeat this pattern. And you keep repeating, reinforcing the new method, and ultimately you learn something new. Practice, refine, repeat. The best part about being human is that any complex task or repeat will become natural, putting you in a flow state. Repeating these 4 steps is the neuroplasticity growth loop, and we're going to apply this throughout the whole presentation. So I added a picture. I thought it was cool, hoping to expand a little, and I even added a little quote right here. The mind isn't the only reason for growth, it's our behavior that moves us forward. So yeah, and an important part, I want to say that mistake is a biological response in everything, which kind of reinforces the idea that mistake is a part of living, and your brain knows that with neurotransmitter response such as the dopamines and norepinephrine. So moving on to the practice, we learned the science behind it, which would be our vertical integration, and now it is time to apply this knowledge through horizontal integration. So an important note is think of the brain as a muscle. It responds to growth from frequency and intensity, but I lighten that area since there'll be another video regarding cognitive overload. So we just want to stick to my claims, learning from mistakes. So I do have 2 examples on this slide, or the next, I don't remember. But to simplify the 4 stages we talked about, the neuroplasticity growth loop, I've kind of simplified it into 4 keywords. So it'd be pause by listening, don't react. I realize that change doesn't come from reaction, but it's our perception. Next would be reflect by diagnosing yourself with questions about the system, time frame, mindset, or execution method. So by asking these questions, you can kind of snuggle your way into reaching a closure on why this happened, or why a certain scenario happened. And the critical reason is that closure is comforting, and comfort can help you operate calmly, right? So an example I can think of on top of my head is a bad breakup. The situation inevitably gets better through grieving and acceptance, and whatever you have questions about will be answered from within, leading to closure, right? So moving on to 3, which would be correct or correction, which is just omitting, fixing, and committing to a different approach. To put it shortly, it's trial and error. You just reinforce narrow patterns or add new ones. The commitment aspect. And last is apply, which involves practicing, repeating, and documenting progress. You might find yourself repeating steps 3 and 4, or correcting and applying, but that's actually good, since another favorable characteristics might come into you, which would be consistency. So moving on to the examples. Failing a math test despite your stressed efforts. So what we're going to do is that, okay, I thought there would be like more transitioning right there. So you can pause this video if you like. I'm probably going to take a few seconds to just drink water. Drink water through my iconic Aquaman cup. And I would like to see what you can apply from, our previous topics. So, yeah. So, first thing you could do is take a breather, right? It is very frustrating that, your brain expected to pass and it didn't happen. So, it's very frustrating. And unfortunately, no matter how you react, the result won't change. What's done is done, to put it simply. So you understand that change doesn't flourish from reaction, but from a controlled decision and reflection. So asking questions like, did I sleep well? Have I procrastinated my studying session? Was it my mindset? Being super stressed during my learning? Could it be the way I studied without breaks? Having fatigue, or no food or water, so just hungry, dehydrated. You came up with a closure, and it turns out that you crammed in long periods of studying with little to no sleep, and this is where our critical thinking is tested. So this would go to correcting, and my answer would be, instead of procrastinating, you can easily set a timer for 25 minutes and focus on what you can. No rush, no distractions, no expectations. You can structure that 2 or 3 times a day, every single day, leading to a compounding expertise in the subject you're being tested on. And you can measure it by setting up a quick quiz to see what you got wrong, and then the cycle repeats until there's no holes to fill, reaching mastery. So that is my answer. I hope you guys got something similar. There's really no right or wrong answer when it comes to these, because it's really just, everybody's perception is different. And this next example is very broad, and that is, people are suspecting you of wrongdoing. And I'm going to take a few seconds, make sure I don't mess up the script, because this is my very first time, and I don't know what I'm doing, honestly. I'm trying to get better. Alrighty. Got my answers. So, this scenario is frustrating, regardless of how the problem came about. Politeness is your top priority. We can stick to listening, because if we act prematurely or say things out of reactiveness, examples like making assumptions, the conversation would stray from the point of concern. If emotions were already involved in the very first step, they could interfere, with the brain's logic, making things less efficient for this scenario. So, as we discussed earlier, there's always time to pause and reflect, especially when thinking is required. You could keep this discussion surface level for now if the tension is high, and it just goes straight into step 2, which would be focusing on the error. So it gets pretty uncomfortable, since the brain might have expected outcomes like being understood or trusted. So naturally, questions like, why would they think of me like that, might come up. You can easily ask the person more about it with an open-minded way to grasp the error and reach closure, so that we can think critically. The discussion is near its end, so you're at step 3, which would be correction. So discussion is near its end, so now you're at step 3, which would be correction. You address the mistake, apologize for what happened, and offer a middle ground or compromise that both can agree on. Since the scenario isn't really complex, there's no trial and error. It's more about taking the initiative to be better. It's not really about pleasing others, but it's for yourself, since change comes from within. The time has come to apply whatever the time has come to apply whatever our surroundings are asking for. Nothing goes perfectly, so we went back and forth a couple of times, correcting, applying, trial and error. But ultimately, your performance has increased, and the people around you are pleased. And and hopefully you set an example of growth. Additionally, after seeing the benefits, you might even feel gratitude towards the person who brought up the issue, because their feedback is what strengthen your foundation. So that is my answer. It's very broad. You don't have to be on the dot with what I came up with. Everybody has their own approach, so I just want to keep that in mind. So one short detail I see on the script is that if someone is condescendingly bringing up the problem with insults or remarks, you can just simply take the initiative and set a boundary. What I would say in this scenario is that, look, I'm not willing to listen to your concerns whenever it's presented like this. So in a way, you shoot your shot and their ball's in their court. So if they persist, then honestly, it's really not your problem anymore. And, we don't grow from insults, right? It's all positive. So, to strengthen my claim, right? Every teaching should come with counterclaims, because it allows us to reinforce our thinking and provide a deeper explanation for why I insist that making mistakes is the best way to grow. So all future counterclaims have some truth to them, but this section of the video might be a little more nuanced. So yeah, let's tackle these claims. So moving on to counterclaim 1, which is, you don't have to be wrong to grow, you can learn by being right. So this is true. There's really no laws saying you can't learn by being in the right, but it's more so it's the repetition of being in the right, which would be correction and applying, that makes us learn and grow. So my rebuttal to this statement is that there's a distinction between right and wrong, and the key words would be mastery versus potential. So let me cook. Being in the right can show mastery of the subject, but being in the wrong shows potential and promise. So the best way to combine these two aspects could be limiting our idea of excellence. An example would be staying more grounded and less ego-driven on a topic, and that way we can naturally bias ourselves to adapt and learn continually. And then before moving on to the two examples in the bottom, another reason my rebuttal could be strengthening is that if you perceive yourself as the expert, even on a single subject, and this could be your career field, right? That closed-mindedness will eventually spill into other areas, and then it could interfere, with the neuroplasticity growth cycle. Because our uninterrupted ego greatly exaggerates the expected result versus the actual outcome. So I guess in a way that there's really no reason to be the all-knowing, because that's honestly quite boring if you ask me. If you know everything, yeah, I don't even know what to say about that, honestly. That's boring. I love learning, it's hard to learn, but I never want to be the smartest person in the room, and that's not great for longevity as well. So briefly moving on to the examples. Think of being in the wrong as an opportunity to get better, patching up a hole that will strengthen your foundation and structure, which can later become a mastery, which goes back into our ability to learn and be continuous with the loop. And another example would be by constantly framing yourself in the right via justification of our own reaction/behaviors, we subconsciously close doors to growth. And this is true, I'd say, because if we continuously enable ourselves to justify our unfavorable reaction towards things, an example could be like envy, right? We really do deny a room to grow because it requires a lot of effort, it's uncomfortable, and the level of accountability you might have to take for an act of pity greatly adds on to the discouraging steps of growth. I don't know if that made sense, but it just, it really takes effort to learn and take accountability. So if the context is that you justified yourself in doing ugly things and now you have to pay, you're most likely you're gonna bail yourself out of that because it's so overwhelming, right? To take accountability, right? It's so much process, so much energy. It takes time too. But anyway, moving on. For every counterclaim or rebuttal, I should say, I always put a logic at the end of the slide, right? And so that would be being in the right. It gives us a proof that there's no incentive to learn, so the brain could subconsciously establish the idea that the neural connection can stay as it is, which could consequently strengthen that pattern of denial, right? And it just goes back to the science of neuroplasticity, strengthening and weakening pathways. If you close your doors to an opportunity that can strengthen a favorable pathway, it's gonna, I guess, ironically strengthening the weak. So moving on to counterclaim 2. If someone is always wrong, especially without guidance or support, it can lead to discouragement, shame, or self-doubt, which is true. Our brain is prone to associating the idea of being wrong with negative feedback, which ties back to the neuroscience lesson and the mini temper tantrums our brain throws, right? Along with the lines that we behave less when punished and more when rewarded. So our goal is to reframe a scenario so we don't demoralize ourselves. Instead, we use it as a fuel to grow. So my rebuttal, and the key word would be guidance and positive framing of any scenario, right? So you can look at it almost as a defensive strategy in mitigating defeat, right? Like this line, we'll go over this lesson. We can provide ourselves guidance strategically, like shifting perspective to counteract ideas of negativity, like discouragement, shame, or self-doubt. And a brief example is if we're constantly at fault, right? Instead of feeling discouraged, we can take a step back, see the bigger picture, right, and reflect: what am I doing, right? Am I doing the right thing? If so, what is the problem? Is it my perspective or is it my system, right? So in a way, we can practice extracting meaning from the lesson with an open mind. So we have to frame it positively, and it always circles back to the reflection step in neuroplasticity growth cycle. So the closing logic is that if we frame mistakes positively, like in the error reflection phase, right, and create closure, we kind of unintentionally foster a safe environment to think and try new methods, which aids in growth and wisdom. And another important detail I see on the script is that it's really up to us on how we perceive what is wrong. Almost like being wrong is subjective, right? So, an example I can think of is that a wiser man might view their most significant mistake as the best, and might even double down and say it was a deliberate step in their progress. In contrast, another may say nothing positively about it and see that the regret has taken over their life. And to put it simply, it's really the mindset that shifts our trajectory forward or backwards. It's not really quite simple in terms of like winner or loser mindset, but the choice is really yours. You know, if you want to continue to let regret or grief attach and kind of like, you know, let that identify you, like, I mean, all I know is if I do that, nothing good is gonna come into my life. So that's what I think about it. And so I just thought that would be an important detail to close on this counterclaim. So moving on to counterclaim 3. Some people argue that it's smart to avoid being in the wrong in the first place by learning from others' mistakes or through preparation and caution, right? And this is kind of a unique example, and we might go a little bit out of the topic's territory, but essentially I do agree with this statement. Learning from another is a form of vertical integration, and it is a very smart thing to do. And, you know, in some scenarios like jobs, surgeons, pilots, and engineers cannot make mistakes. They carry a very low margin of error, right? But going back to this claim, preparation and caution are thoughtful in the sense that they reduce the odds of you paying the consequences, you know, by avoiding mistakes. But like, you know, to think outside of the box, what if nobody takes initiative? What if everybody is just as cautious as you, and you know, it just everybody is just waiting for another to like make the first move. Like, I say that's pretty counterproductive, which brings me to my rebuttal, right? Which would be, nobody can be the best if they only have one part of the information down, you know, in a sense that vertical. And the key words would be learning and applying. So high risk professions reach that level of responsibilities after studying, which is the vertical part, spending years in low risk or controlled environments where mistakes aren't costly, as well as safely learning from, you know, their own mistakes and applying their newly acquired knowledge to their existing experience, which would be horizontal. So if those you didn't understand what I just said, it's perfectly fine. I'm just trying to say that learn from the top and learn from your peers. That is the best way to get both worlds. So an excellent example below, right, says you can learn from any subjects you want from books and others, but does that mean mistakes are avoided when applying that knowledge? And a simple answer is no. So my logic, which would be vertical, horizontal equals best, best growth, which would be, you end up in a higher stakes position with minimal failure by the individual. And a little mnemonic I added to make it easier for the vertical horizontal integration is that in order to be a pro, you have to learn like a pro and make mistakes like a pro. So one thing I like to share or add is going back to what I said about how this claim is unique. It really stems the question, like, what does it mean to say that it's smarter to avoid being in the wrong in the first place by learning from others? And the word I came on top of my head was just fear, right? So a compelling argument for this topic is that, sure, learning from others is smart, but looking at it from the bigger picture, what are you doing in the meantime, right? Preparing for, what? You can only prepare for so long. And an example is, I don't really remember where I heard this, but if you were to compare yourself to someone, let's say the other guy is dumber, but is more willing to take risks, and you're the smarter or cautious person who prioritizes certainty. If you guys if you guys both start at the same level in your careers, which would kind of go to the concept of exposure versus like learning, who would win, right? A guy who waits for others to try, or the person who already takes the initiative? And I'm sure it's obvious. The guy who takes initiative has made countless mistakes and has become a top-level performer, while the smarter guy has been scaling his progress off of others because he prioritizes certainty. We can kind of look at this and think, who is really the more intelligent person, right? Judging by these results. And without going deeper, the answer is faith. So I'm just going to stop it right there. Moving on to the next slide, which comes to key takeaways. So counterclaim 1, being open-minded to mistakes enables us to see them as an opportunity to grow on top of mastery, right? Counterclaim 2 would be framing mistakes positively, and we can alter our perspective to make it appear as positive feedback and understanding what you learned. Learning from others is one aspect of intelligence, but applying it and being capable of learning from ourselves is what completes our intelligence. So, and I got some mnemonics. To be a pro, you must learn like a pro, but also make mistakes like one, because professionals don't avoid being wrong. They analyze, adjust, and grow from it. Discomfort first, positive reinforcement after, which just means feeding the growth loop. Feedback, not fault. Feedback is data that can guide us to improve. Failure is a diagnostic. It allows us to see where to improve, and it's certainly not what makes you. It's certainly not who you are. Is actually what I should have just said. Accountability is a form of control. You control how positive you perceive the mistakes to be, which aids your character and development. So these are just the two sources, some light, and then my thoughts, right? I still have this scripted, so I'm just going to read it. I'm a little overdue from posting this. My schedule from the previous video said that I was going to put one to 2 lessons every week, but I didn't really expect to make this video kind of in like a full comprehensive guide. Because I kind of started adding on like how can I prove my claim right, and it just compounded into this slideshow. So I don't know how long this video was going to take, but I thought it was just going to be a short video, just quickly backing up my claims, but I kind of went a little ambitious, and I ended up feeling like a professor when I was kind of going through these slides and ensuring that what I'm teaching is valuable. So, along with school and just work, hanging out with my girlfriend, I just have to find ways to time manage properly. So I'll just be doing a lot of trial and error. Maybe shorter form videos, like do one video would just be going over the topics, and then another video would be counterclaims. But we'll just see. We'll just see. But anyway, I really appreciate those who took the time to finish or watch this video, and I hope what we discussed has rewarded your curiosity with something new and applicable. Sorry. I guess one thing I want to add after each video, even though this video might be long, is that for each video I have an incentive behind this, and this is completely off script, so I won't speak as properly as the scripts. So I have a pretty profound example of someone who doesn't like admitting that they're wrong. It could be the most obvious answer, but this person in particular frames the scenario in a way that pittiness comes in. The person react unfavorably towards a topic, which kind of places her in the wrong, right? Because the topic itself is always emotionally or personally driven, and whenever this person is in a position to take accountability, a way this person does is that they step back, and then kind of like self-pities, which makes the other person comfort. And so I'm just like thinking about this, like I'm like, damn, I really don't want to see any more of this person in the world. So I just thought that would be a great incentive to start this channel with the topic of why being in the wrong is the best way to grow. In regards to this person, there's no potential of growth coming out of this individual, and that's probably the worst thing I could honestly think of as a person trying to run this mentorship. So it's just a little fun fact. Just a little fun fact, incentive of this video, and this example I have will not be the last time I mention. It's going to be brought up in future videos, and yeah. So anyway, there's really nothing much to share. I really do appreciate for sticking around, and hopefully for the next topic I have a an idea that it's not really gonna branch away too much from what we discussed in this video, but anyways, it's really up to me, right? So stay curious, and then I'll hope to see you guys later. Bye bye.